So Patrick, thank you again for coming to my home podcast studio and just being a guest on Therapy for Guys. I'm super excited to continue our series exploring the various different cards in the tarot. I know we're looking at the Major Arcana.
Thanks, Kike. It's always a pleasure. I really enjoy these podcasts with you here. There's so much to learn from these cards, and I've been learning myself, like doing the research and refreshing some of the books that I've collected throughout the years, and going back to all this subject material that I thought I knew, but then I discovered something new, and that's the fun part of this.
Yeah, and I've got to say, I sometimes feel like, oh, what are people going to think when they see me posting about the tarot? Or I have various different tarot cards in my office at work, and I have some clients that I don't know if they were bothered by them, but they just were not sure why I would have them, because I'm not necessarily someone who's into like new age spirituality and all the kind of woo-woo stuff. I'm not going to judge that. It's just not necessarily my cup of tea. But I guess I mentioned all that to say I love the tarot in the same kinds of ways that I love dreams, because I see them as filled with all this rich symbolism. And I love symbols. I love images. And I like to go deep. And I like to explore what these things could mean for our lives.
Precisely. I agree. I couldn't agree more. And I love tarot because I love art. And
there you go.
You got imagery in these. I was studying astrology for some time and really got into it, but it's so abstract. You don't have images, concrete visual representations of the things that they're talking about. But in tarot, it's just a galaxy of ideas and possibilities from an archetypal perspective.
Oh, I love that. A galaxy of ideas and possibilities from an archetypal perspective. Oh, I need to write that down. Patrick, I thought about you the other day. Man, maybe it was yesterday. I interviewed this wonderful philosopher. His name is Grant Maxwell. And he's into a lot of different philosophers, but we connected over our shared appreciation for someone like Richard Tarnas, who I know you kind of first introduced me to. He actually got to know him quite well. They're friends. And so, you came up in our conversation because I was telling him we were about to talk about your deck. But yeah, Richard Tarnas was somebody who I learned about from you. So thank you.
Absolutely. Well, appreciate it. Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up, because Tarnas, I would really recommend Cosmos and Psyche. Passion of the Western Mind is the book that I started reading back in 1997, I believe it was. It was my introduction to philosophy, and it's just a great mind to explore, and his writings are just delightful.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Very insightful.
Well, as it comes to kind of what we're looking at today, I was thinking about this. This is kind of your sixth time on the podcast, and I mentioned that because the Pope, or in your deck you refer to him as El Papa, which is the Pope in Spanish. Sometimes he's referred to as the Hierophant. Is that how I pronounce that?
Hierophant, yeah.
Hierophant. I guess the one who teaches about sacred things or holy things. I think that's what Hierophant means.
Yes, it depends on your personal issues with the Catholic Church. If you have an issue with the history of the church, well, of course, you're going to feel more comfortable using the Hierophant. And if you are more inclined towards the esoteric and the pagan roots of the card, then, of course, you're going to have that choice to make. But for anyone who is open to history and just, I feel I don't have any problems using the term Pope or Papa, because after all, the tarot is a product of the Renaissance, not of a ancient pagan civilization, but of a Catholic culture.
Yeah.
So it really reflects on that, but it goes beyond that. People have to understand that even though you see a pope, it's more about the symbol and the archetype beyond, let's say, our own personal bias or anything we might think about in terms of what we think about the institution itself.
Yeah. And I guess what's coming up for me is, this is even going back to some of my undergraduate studies. I did a religious studies minor, and I remember several professors making the point, no matter how you feel about the institutions of religion today, and there's a lot to say about them that are quite negative, right? We could sit here and critique the Catholic Church, or even, types of Protestantism, or even some forms of Buddhism. I mean, we could sit here and just really critique it. I think it's important to understand how religion is intimately tied up with human history.
Yes.
Regardless of how you feel about it, I think it's important to understand some of the symbols and some of the teachings, because it has shaped, especially Western culture, if we're thinking about sort of Christianity.
Not just that, but our intellectual heritage, our
well
moral
said.
judgments, our everyday lives are affected by laws that are, in one way or another influenced by religion.
Yeah.
But it is a ground, a foundation from where everything springs forth, even the critique of religion itself. Everything in one way or another is affected by that root there, that is our Western root of Christian, heritage.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, if you want to read some of the most scathing critiques of certain types of religion, go into some of the sacred text and read about how they critique previous forms of it. I'm thinking of Jesus and certain aspects of how Judaism had morphed into this thing, in the first century. He could be very scathing in his critique of types of religion.
Yeah, well, and you have a figure like Martin Luther, a Christian critiquing the church,
the Catholic Church.
So the first to criticize the church come from within the church, and they're church figures.
Yes.
So
the prophets did that.
The prophets did that, and as you say, Jesus did that with the how you say it in English, the Pharisees,
the Pharisees.
Pharisees, yeah. So. It's throughout history. It's ingrained in the institution itself.
Oh yeah. So okay, so going back to the card for a second, the Pope or the Hierophant is number 5, but
yes,
but it's technically the 6th card in the Major Arcana because the Fool is 0.
Is 0. But let's just stop there for a moment, because the Fool is 0. Therefore, he's really outside. He's an outsider. He can go anywhere. He can be placed in any order. He can. Some people consider him to be last, or not even part of the deck, like a separate card all by himself. So the Pope is the 5th card, and there's a reason for it. There's 5 is also the number of our senses. It's also the symbol of humanity. Because we have 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head. So when you think about 5, you think about human nature. You think about your 5 fingers on each hand. So it is really that all comes to play a big part on the arrangement and composition of the card itself. Which, if you look at the card, you have the Pope at the center, but you have 2 pillars and 2 followers under him, right? So he is in the center. So he is the quintessence. It forms an X. So there's some numerology behind the card as well that we can go into. So the 5 is really important. The 6 we'll get to the 6th card, which is the Lovers.
Lovers, yeah,
which trumps the. We always say that the card that comes after trumps the card that came before. And what I mean by trump is that it defeats. So, of course, that love is going to be more powerful than any institution.
Yeah.
So that comes after.
Yeah. And I'm sort of really just joking here and trying to be a little bit funny, but it's interesting that you've talked about, or you've used the word Trump and then lovers. It's interesting what's happening right now.
Yeah.
And, a type of love act, has gotten a person named Trump in quite a bit of trouble. But we don't have to go there.
I thought about it too. It's unavoidable. It's in your mind because you read the news.
Yeah.
You can't ignore it. You can't ignore it. But one thing that I want to talk about this card, I find it fascinating because we were talking about the Fool, as you mentioned. We went on to the Magician and so on up to this card. All of this time, we have been exploring cards that, in one way or another, we can see in our day-to-day lives. Let's say the fool, you see him in the street. He's the beggar.
I look in the mirror and I see
you
the fool.
Sometimes we see in ourselves, me as well,
or my kids.
or you can, in a more superficial manner, you might consider some people in the street as fools, because they are very much in the same attire and appearance as in the fool in the tarot.
Like a homeless person,
a vagabond, yeah. So, and in the magician, you would see anyone who is performing anything, right? Doing some sort of public performance. An artist,
and we see that all the time.
We see that all the time, and especially with social media, it's all about that, right? The magician is front and center in the TikTok generation. It's all about that.
Oh, don't even get me started on that one.
There's a lot to talk about. I mean, there's a lot to unload there. But then you have the papisa or the popis, who is the gypsy, the oracle, the fortune teller. And you're also familiar with that in popular culture.
Sure.
We are very much exposed to that. People who read the cards and are into all this new age, lifestyle and all that. But then you have the empress and the emperor, which are really father and mother figures. Now, when you confront the Pope, this is something else completely. It is not something you see day to day unless you're paying attention to the news and very much reading about Pope Francis, let's say, or exposed to the Catholic Church.
Which, by the way, did you see his new coat? That real puffy coat? That was pretty crazy, man.
Yeah, the AI is just changing everything. It's changing everything. I saw these photos of Trump being arrested. It's all AI, but you could believe for one moment that looks so real. Like
wow.
He's getting the police or grabbing him and taking him by force. Like, it's scary.
And it fooled you.
And it fools you because you really, like, I sent those pictures to my brother. It's like, look what happened. And he thought it was like, no, but that is something that with the Pope, going back to the Pope.
Yeah.
It's not a figure that you would be familiar or you would be necessarily closely related to. Because it's so far away. It's so far removed from our own experience. Just by the mere fact that the Pope, you associate the Pope with priests and celibacy, and whatever you think about all the scandals and everything, it's part of the symbol. It's part of the attire of the habit, and it's very far removed from this generation that is so sensual and so influenced and guided by the senses. And this seems to be someone who is really far from that, far removed from the real world. Like, he seems to be from a different time. Like the Empress and the Emperor, you might go to the Renaissance Festival and you see someone dressed up like that.
Yeah.
But the Pope, no one is going to dress up like that unless he's mocking the Pope. And that is very rare, like a Halloween costume or something. But it seems like it's an entity on its own, and it's above everything else.
Yeah.
And regardless of what you think about the Pope himself, right? So I just wanted to clarify that so you know the distinction and the comparison from what we've been discussing before and what we're now dealing with, which is a lot more abstract and a lot more complex. Every archetype starts to build layers and layers.
That's a good way to put it. No, yeah. and I appreciate what you just said. I think that's helpful context. Okay, a couple things. First, don't let me forget. If we drink enough, I'm gonna go ahead and share, I think, a really funny and probably offensive joke. Maybe at the end, which I think you'll find pretty hilarious. And in terms of drinking, just so everyone knows, this will be up on YouTube, but we're just gonna have the card so you can't see it. But we're actually enjoying a bottle of Cabernet, and it's called the Tarot. How do you say it? Le Pape?
Le Pape.
Le Pape, like
El Papa.
El Papa. So we're basically drinking this incredible bottle of wine that actually is like a tarot version, and it's the Pope. So it's like really fitting for our conversation. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yes, it's really good, by the way.
Oh, it's one of the best I've ever had. Like, I'm going to have to try to find it again. It was expensive, but worth it.
I'm curious. I find it quite interesting that from all the cards, the wine is called Tarot. That's the name.
That's the name, yeah.
But you have the Pope card. Did you see other cards on other bottles?
Yeah. So I bought it at HEB, and for those who are listening outside of Texas, that's like our major grocery store, Herbert E. Butt. But yeah, they had two. They had the Pope, and damn it, I think it might have been the Lovers or maybe the Tower. Mm-hmm. So I need to go on the internet and find and see if they have like all the different cards, because maybe I can get one for each card. My wife will hate me for that because they're fucking expensive, but I think they're worth it and they're really good.
So depending on the occasion, I'm assuming, because the Pope might be related to the Eucharist, so this might be for different use. Right?
There you go. Yeah.
And the Lovers have...
Oh, man. Okay, yeah, you give me some good ideas.
Yeah, so depending on the situation, you use a different kind of wine.
There you go.
Yeah.
And look, I know lately I've been doing a lot of episodes, virtually, and that's great because I can connect with people all over the world, but there's nothing like sitting with a good friend, discussing these amazing ideas and just sharing, a bottle of wine. So I'm happy right now.
Yeah, me too. I appreciate it. I appreciate you inviting me.
Of course, Patrick. So are you okay if we do kind of what we've done in the past? Just have me read your summary that you wrote.
Sure.
So this is from your deck, Tarot Neocolonial de las Americas. You wrote a little booklet that comes with the deck. Mm-hmm. And as always, I've included that link in the show notes. I encourage anyone who's listening or watching to actually buy your deck because it's incredible. Please get some more. Yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and read the summary for El Papa. Holding a satellite dish with one hand while blessing two supplicants, the Pope sits firmly in the middle as a mediator, not just between heaven and earth, but between past and present. The familiar-looking supplicants represent the rich, those in power, and corporations. They take inspiration from the first transnational corporation in history, the Church. A dollar bill with the all-seeing eye from the Great Seal can be seen above the Pope. This reminds us of the power and influence of institutionalized fictions in human civilization. In times of peace, the market takes over and the economy flourishes with the free flow of goods and ideas. But this holy emissary can also become a purveyor of propaganda in favor of those in powerful positions to keep control over the masses. In the seascape behind, we see a Spanish caravel and a modern-day cargo ship. This brings to mind the Columbian Exchange, which started in 1492 and was a great turning point in local ecospheres, biology, and cultures around the globe. This card marks the dawn of a new globalized age, Novus Ordo Seclorum. The Pope is not just about the power of religion, but the power of belief. The belief in a capitalist creed and system based on common trust, in God we trust, in pieces of paper and the myth of perpetual growth in the name of profit. This card speaks of orthodoxy, dogmatism, and sanctimony, but it also reveals our naivete and susceptibility to conforming to the rules of society. It is servitude and submitting blindly to an unquestioned belief imposed by tradition and mass consent. In a reading, this card can also be interpreted as receiving guidance and counsel from an old mentor. Well said, my friend.
Thanks. I must add to that, and this just came to mind, that it's easy to forget that for most part of our history, of modern history, at least from after Christ, right, when the church had established so much power and centrality in our society, it's easy to forget that the church was everything. Like, the belief in God was unquestionable. And we live in a different time right now. So, in that time, of course, the Pope was infallible, and anything that he might do or say was just, he was the divine representative of God on earth, and everyone thought so until the Reformation, and with the Counter-Reformation and the Protestant movement and all that. But before that, it was pretty much the law of the land. So what we come to understand with this card is not only a figure that is synonymous to the most powerful institution of its time. The tarot, let's remember, was created during the Renaissance, and at that time, that was the last word. He had the last word on everything. The bulas papales, the papal bulls, were these manuscripts that were published and were well known throughout Europe, that decided the destiny of the colonies in the New World. Let's say the Intercatera decided what lands went to Portugal, what lands went to Spain. That was not decided by a king or an emperor. That was decided by the Catholic Church itself. And by the way, I must mention this because this just came out in the news recently that Pope Francis apologized officially on behalf of the church for that.
Wow.
For that specific papal bull of dividing the lands and subduing the people that were not Christian, and that they had this legal divine authority over the peoples of the New World, and that was given by the Catholic Church. It's easy to forget this whole history. You know, it's very it carries much negative connotations. And that's why people have so much trouble, reconciling with the church. And I understand that. If you read the history, it's just there's a lot of things to unpack, but that's going to take us into a whole different direction. We don't want to deviate. But the thing is that today, the church is not as powerful. People just might, listen to the Pope, but his opinions might be valid. But ultimately, there are others who have the power of deciding the fate of the world. And I'm talking about large transnational corporations. So in that sense, today, they're the ones who are playing the role of Pope, so to speak, right? The large tech companies, social media, these financial institutions that have the real grip on and hold on how people behave and respond in a consumer capitalist society. So in our terms, modern terms, that is what this card would represent if we would interpret it in light of current circumstances.
Yeah. Oh man, so well said. So Patrick, if you're cool with this, I kind of want to just do what we've done before, which is just kind of break down your specific card with all the rich symbolism, and maybe you can just kind of offer your commentary and your thoughts so we can kind of see where the conversation goes.
Yeah, of course. Well, right now Trump is very much on the news, and he's in this card. That's one of the first places I wanted to go. Like, I'm going to explain this because I know a lot of people have trouble with this. Is why you paint Trump so much? And I've been depicting this character, this public figure for years, even before he was before
he was candidate. President, right? Yeah.
Way before. Because I understand the power of archetypes, and I understand the symbology behind this figure. The rich guy, the executive, the plutocratic ruler. It's all about money. Money buys it all. Regardless of what you think about the guy, that's the symbol. So I found it quite appropriate that he might be accompanied by Ronald McDonald, another iconic figure from our consumer culture. It represents capitalism and consumerism side by side. So there are two sides of one coin, and they both bow down to this institution, which is the corpocracy, with the mass media, the diffusion of these with the satellite dish, the dollar sign, and all that, and it's all transnational in nature. That's why it's so appropriate for this card, because if you look at the hat that the Pope is wearing, which has been brought up many times, the mitra or the tiara, looked sideways on a profile view, it looks like a fish looking up. So the fish has been a symbol of the Christian religion way before the cross. The cross is more recent, but the early Christians used the fish as a symbol to identify that they were Christian. So it's really the religion of the fish. And you think of so many biblical references to the fisher of men and all that. So, and that ties in so well with the Pope because it's about spreading the gospel across the seas, just like corporations spread their message, and the golden arches can be seen everywhere around the globe.
Everywhere, right? I was just thinking that.
So they behave in the very same. They follow the same pattern in many ways. The modern day corporations have adopted and appropriated a lot of the strategies and branding of the church. That you go to a church in Peru and you go to a church in Guatemala, no matter if it was done in 1500 or 1600, they carry the same symbols, images, and you can understand the language if you're already familiar with it. And no matter where, it's just homogeneous, uniformly globalized. So corporations are just adopting the very same language. And I find that fascinating, just, from my perspective as a painter, using this symbol.
Dude, that's amazing. Yeah. So I think one of the first questions I had was, as I sit and just look at the image and wrestle with the symbolism, I know like in the Rider Waite, the Pope is holding the cross, right? A clear symbol of Christianity. But in this one, he's holding a satellite dish.
Yes.
What does that mean to you?
Well, when I grew up, we didn't have satellite dishes in the 80s. We had these antennas that looked like triple crosses. That looked like you had all these horizontal bars and a vertical bar in the middle.
I'm old enough to remember that, yeah.
And I remember we didn't have enough signal on the TV. We only had like 3 channels. And someone had to get up on the roof of the house and just move the antenna to get a better signal. We didn't have internet or anything. People forget this, but for those who grew up in that time, it was very boring to be watching like PBS all day, Sesame Street, or the channels that you got a chance to. But for me, the satellite dish represents just that: the diffusion, the global diffusion of the message of spreading the gospel. And in this time of age, it's not. I feel like it's the TV, but it's more like social media.
Probably social media now, right?
Yeah, it's more social media. But I grew up with television, so MTV generation, So for me, it comes to be a perfect replacement. It makes a whole lot of sense. Not just because visually they look very much similar, but the triple cross is also a symbol of the Trinity. You have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, but that's why there are 3 lines to it. And that's the original meaning for the triple cross staff.
Sure. Now, the dollar bill in the background of your card, I think religion has had a complicated relationship with capital, with money. And I know you have a lot of thoughts on that. Can you speak to why you decided to make that kind of a prominent symbol?
Yeah,
in your deck.
In the book of *Sapiens* by Yuval Noah Harari, he makes the case that that our belief in money is just another phase of religion. Our belief in the currency and the current financial system, the way it works, the way it operates, it's very similar to the way we put our trust in God or a church or an institution or the Pope himself. Because if you look at any dollar bill, it says, "In God we trust." But what it really means is that we trust in this thing, in this piece of paper. And by having the word God, which is a very powerful word, very short but very straightforward, you're equating this piece of paper with the highest form of any being. Like, this is your religion now. You have to follow this. And no one questions the value and power of a dollar, even though it's just let's say aliens landed tomorrow here on Earth and they just look at us and they just start to see how we exchange these no longer pieces of paper, because it's more like credit card transactions. It's all digital now, but it's all symbolic. And why? Just try to think about it from an outside perspective. The same applies to the card itself. Sometimes people become so obsessed by the image of the Pope and what it all carries and all the history it drags. Just try to put yourselves like from an outsider perspective. You're an alien. You're looking at this card and you see an old dude that is in a throne. So, in other words, a position of power. You're not thinking about the church because you don't know anything. You don't know anything about church. You just know that people are following this guy. They're two followers. They're two priests that are bending the knee or they're just like submitting to this older dude. Like, why? What is his power? He's just senile. He's old. He's gonna die soon, right? Just try to think about it without all these preconceptions of what you have and know or understand about the church, but just as the image. What does the image say? You know, sometimes I find this quite helpful for any card or any work of art. Just try to detach yourself from anything that you might think you know, and just look at the image and let it speak. It's very rare to see any authors that I've read. I've been reading Sally Nichols, Rachel Pollack, Robert Place, Alejandro Jodorowsky, and none of them mention the fact that this is an elderly ruler, and it's very significant that he is old. Sometimes he has a white beard. He seems very tired in some of these versions of these cards. He's like a great-grandfather, not a grandfather. He seems older than that. And when you look at most of the popes that have gone throughout history, they're old guys. They're really older. The older, the better. It seems like that is part of the requirement.
Sure. Okay, so where in terms of me just going where my psyche is going, do you think this is an aspect of our contemporary culture here in the United States where maybe we're missing something in terms of not being connected to like wisdom or elders, people that have experience that could speak to us and could help guide us? And I asked that question with the caveat that, you know, I've always kind of been a bit of a rebel. I'm sort of anti-authoritarian. You know, I was never in seasons of my life where I was kind of a part of institutional religion. I always pushed the boundaries and eventually, you know, was kicked out and left, you know? So I'm definitely not pro institutional religion, but I just wonder, if I'm being honest and looking in the mirror, have I severed too much? Am I rudderless now? Am I just, you know, drowning in an ocean without any kind of direction?
I think that's pretty much spot on and a very good reflection on the times that we're living in. There's this book that I really recommend, even though I haven't finished it yet. Agustin Laje has this book called Generación Idiota, Idiot Generation. Of course, he's not speaking of a specific generation. He's just implying that we live in a day and age that's quite adolescentric. You know, we live in the TikTok era, and everything is driven by teens, like celebrities, the media.
By teens, do you mean like adolescents, teenagers?
Yeah, that mindset. Yeah. Not necessarily teens, but the mindset of a teen.
Okay.
That is always in transition, and it's always very, you know, sensitive and
not fully developed.
Not fully developed. It's changing his mind constantly. It's all about fashion, changing trends, the image. It's all focused on the image. So, and he makes this case that I find fascinating, that in ancient times, and he provides plenty of examples from ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and even going back to tribal customs and cultures across Africa and Australia and different civilizations. The older the farther back you go in time, the more idealized was the old people. Like, old people were idealized, respected, revered. Like, let's say revered. The old sage, the shaman, the wise men, all the political bodies in Rome were elderly guys. The Senate.
I think of the tribal elders.
Yeah, the tribal elders. But as you go forward in time and you reach the Enlightenment in the 1800s, 1700s, and 1800s, it's more focused toward the adult, and it's the age of reason. So it's no longer the old people. We have to rebel against the old. Now we are modern. The modern man is an adult. But today, Agustin Laje makes this argument that it's no longer the adult. He's out. He's passé. It's all about, what you can do on your Instagram account and how many followers you have. It's very much an adolescent mindset. It's a teenage mindset that's driving culture, and it's driving all the trends today, and it's influencing everything, even politics. Just think about, and I'm not talking necessarily in a negative way, just take Greta Thunberg, for example. Look how much power this little girl, she's 16 years old. She's no longer a little girl. She's a teenager. But look how much power and influence she has over politicians at the United Nations, that they're applauding and cheering at her, So that is a powerful symbol of our times, regardless of what you think of her. And I think the Pope comes to speak to this time that we're no longer connected or seem close to. As soon as and this happens a lot in the United States, our parents grow old. You see a lot of people putting them in homes. They don't want to take care of them. They don't want to, and other times it might have been different. The older parents would stay at home. You would take care of your elderly, and they would be a very important part of the family, and also teaching valuable lessons to the grandchildren and great-grandchildren. But it seems like society is changing the way they value and see and appreciate and understand old age. And I think that comes very much into focus with this card.
Okay. So, man, there's just so much I want to say in response. But I guess before I, bloviate and just share what I want to share, I mean, just I guess a follow-up question. What's the danger with losing touch with this like senex figure, this older, wise, grounded person? What effects do you see in our contemporary culture that are troubling to you? That not to be simplistic, but that may be related to our distancing from a figure like the Pope?
Well, because today, and this has a lot to do with the way the tech firms and companies like Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and they're very much, and Apple and Google are very much of a central part of the public sphere, and they really incentivize innovation, which is contrary to experience. So anyone who is experienced in something, it's no longer valued in the same way. It's no longer doesn't hold the same status, because we live in an age of constant change that you have to adapt. And in order to adapt, your mind has to be flexible, bendable, and you have to be able to mold yourself in new forms, because that's the nature of our society that is very tech driven. Old people, of course, fall out of pace with this whole tech advancement, especially with AI and all the advancements. So I feel like the problem with this is that we no longer have a sense of direction. We're no longer grounded. We might be lost in the woods. We might not know the answers to many fundamental questions that are, derived from like things that the very religion that we criticize provides us with. The answers to the meaning of life, the purpose of what our existence,
right,
and that sort of thing that you might criticize, but at the same time, it's like an anchor that keeps you grounded and focused, and in a way you feel complete. I know people might criticize this, but it's a way of understanding the world that is no less valid than someone who is trying everything and open to everything. And the problem is that these people that might be too open to everything are not satisfied with anything.
Yeah, man. So lately, I've been, obsessed and immersed in the philosophy of this South Korean philosopher who actually studied in Germany, and I think he still teaches at the University of Berlin, or he's somehow, still connected to that institution. But his name is Byung-Chul Han. I have a shit ton of his books right in front of us, and you can look through them. There's so much that he's written, and I only have a fraction of the books that he's published because they get translated into English. But one of the things he laments is being severed from tradition, being in what he calls a state of digitality where we're all about, speed and acceleration and publishing on social media, at this insane rate. What we've lost is kind of this sense of narrative, this sense of a larger rooted, grounded story that helps us have a sense of who we are and kind of where we're going. And I don't know if it's an exact correspondence to the Pope card, but when I think about what he represents, tradition, a type of maybe even spiritual or moral compass, I don't know that I can agree with all the specifics of, institutional religion, but I think Byung-Chul Han is onto something when he says we've been what he calls denarrativized. We don't have anything to plot our existence in. We're just aimless. He says we're just whizzing through life, and that doesn't really lead to a satisfying experience or existence. We exhaust ourselves because we think we need to achieve and achieve and achieve, but there's no real goal or purpose.
There's no meaning.
There's no meaning.
There's no center.
Right.
So we're centerless. And I love this title of his book that I'm looking at the books. I really feel them. I feel like this
you should check him out. We should actually do an episode. You should pick one of his books and we should talk about him because I think you'd really resonate with him.
Absolutely, because this title really resonates with me. It's called The Disappearance of Rituals.
Oh, that's a good one.
Have you read it?
I have.
So when you look at the Pope, the Pope, and you look at how he is his posture, he's sitting and he's raising one hand and the signal of blessing his cohorts or his priests that are right in front of him. You can feel the slowness and the ritualistic movements of his hands, very much like what the Eucharist is in the church. There's a lot of ritual in the church.
Yes.
Regardless of what you think, the ritual part of it, I think it's the beautiful part of it, for me, at least. In my experience growing up, I feel like there's a beauty to it. And as a painter, I try to keep up with some sort of ritual. Of course, we live in a different time. We're not going to follow the rituals of an institution that has been centuries old, even though I don't see anything wrong with that. But I implement my own rituals, and I think it adds more meaning to the action that I'm performing, let's say drawing, painting, making art. The ritual aspect of it is something that most people forget because they're living in this rat race that everything is so fast and it has to be done fast. They go to a fast food restaurant, order number one, boom, 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 and it's out, and you eat it, it's out. It's meaningless. It's just so shallow, so deprived of meaning. Really, just think about primitive societies that went out to hunt. They just didn't go out to hunt. That's a misconception. They had a whole ritual depending on the tribe, but they did cave paintings. Like we have plenty of evidence of that from prehistoric societies of painting the animals. Just imagine being there, that magic, the feeling, the mysticism, the natural mystique of feeling that part of your soul being in harmony with that whole act of hunting, regardless of what you think about hunting. But that was a way of life, and there was a ritual involved with it, and it imbued the act with meaning. Today, our acts are sometimes meaningless, or I should say often meaningless.
Yeah. Oh, man. Okay, so one of the things I think you'll resonate about Byung-Chul Han's perspective, just in light of the idea of ritual, is he laments that we've lost the capacity to experience boredom. Because for him, one of the functions of boredom is that it can actually lead us to a type of creativity. And it's speculative, but in one of his books, The Burnout Society, he kind of imagines that, in prehistoric time, if you go back into our evolutionary history, there must have been a time where, maybe a band of hominids were just slowly walking through the plains, and in just being bored out of their fucking mind, they must have imagined the possibility of like dancing. But that wouldn't have come about if they wouldn't have been bored and just walking. And he says we've lost that. He has this concept. I'm not sure what the German word is. I'm becoming friends with one of the translators of his books. Maybe I need to ask him, but he talks about the importance of lingering. In our kind of fast-paced, crazy, social media-oriented society, we're just posting and wanting to achieve and wanting to move to the next thing, and we've lost the capacity to just linger with the moment, linger with what's in front of us. And I think rituals help us with that. And I think in losing ritual, we lose the capacity to just savor the moment, savor our lives.
Yes.
Why are we frenetically moving on to the next thing? I mean, why am I doing that? It's not leading to happiness. It's leading to exhaustion and burnout.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more. I feel like our society is driven by this fast pace of production consumption.
Yes.
That is just detrimental to the human soul, to our own psyche. And we're paying the price for it with depression, with paying for pills, and big pharma is making lots and lots of money out of it.
A lot of fucking money.
Yes. So it's a big business. It goes around like a circle, and it's not accidental. I must say this. It seems like it's all very well planned in a way that makes us consume more, be more unhappy, and then we therefore consume more.
Yeah. Now, okay. So I'm gonna try to inhabit the perspective of a listener who's listening to us talk, and I want to kind of bring up a potential critique, right, of everything we've been saying so far, which is, okay, I hear the importance of being connected to tradition, having some type of narrative that we plot our lives to, but can't authority become oppressive? Can't it become stale? Can't tradition become a barrier to something like progress or change? How do you maybe address that and then hold in tension the importance of having a narrative that structures our life versus a story that is so oppressive it does some real damage?
I would agree, and I would just remind the listener or anyone who comes to that conclusion, which is quite understandable. Every archetype, as in every card in the tarot, has this positive and negative aspect. And the Pope, we have orthodoxy, dogmatism, fundamentalism, hypocrisy, falsehood, dishonesty, inflexibility. He's a doctrinaire. He's imposing this ideology. It's conformity to society's ideas and codes of behavior. So that is very much attached to this card as well. We have to be careful. So I think the key here is to have a healthy balance with each archetype, not to deny it completely, because we all carry our own demons and angels. We have to live with them, not embrace them fully, but not try to cage them fully either. We have to, in a way, become friends with them and understand how we can channel these energies in a productive and creative way.
Yeah. And don't you, okay, this is going to get a little crazy, but don't you think part of the problem with like maybe what we're calling the teenager spirit or maybe the social media culture is that we're all kind of afraid to talk to each other about the fact that we're populated with angels and demons. We just want to come across as though we're just angels, or the other side is just a demon. And we're not honest with the fact that we're all both. We're so many things. And maybe if we, and this is what we were talking about before we hit the record button, maybe if we could figure out how to listen to each other a little bit more, we could have greater space for the variety that's within us.
I couldn't agree more, Kike. And we were talking about this before we started the recording about the importance of listening, which for me personally has been one of the greatest lessons as a parent.
Can you speak to that? I mean,
yeah,
as
sure.
much as you feel comfortable with, as you've encountered that truth in terms of becoming a father, and
yeah, of course, the more I get used to the fact of being a parent. My son is 4 years old, but I'm
beautiful little guy, by the way.
Thanks. Thanks. He's taught me so much, and I must say that by just trying to listen a little bit more and more, and try to put the effort of trying to understand what he's trying to tell me, it's so much more rewarding than trying to tell him what to do, what not to do, and setting a fixed set of rules. It's a lot more enjoyable when you sit with a 4-year-old and try to listen, or anyone in any instance, is to learn something new from this person. Everyone has something to say. Everyone has something valuable to add to the conversation. There's always something you can learn from him. Perhaps you don't agree with everything this person says or does, but there's something you can learn. So that is something I've come to understand as a parent. Not impose, but just let go of my own biases and my own judgments and my own moral preconceptions, which are, might as well say, attached to the Pope, because the Pope, in a way, you can think of a grandparent that already has all these fixed preconceptions, is very stubborn about his points of view and perspectives and views on politics, religion. And we all have had that experience of talking with a grandfather figure, an aunt or an uncle who is old enough to tell us, this is how it is.
Yeah.
And it's my way or the highway.
Or the highway.
And you just have to accept it.
Yeah.
And he said, okay, but let me listen. Because I can listen, but I don't necessarily have to accept everything you're telling me. I just keep it to myself and take the good out of it.
Yes. No, I like it. One of the things that's coming up for me is as you're sharing your experience with, being a father and just learning the value of listening and this is coming not only from my experience as a psychotherapist, but just as a human. Listening entails a type of letting go, a type of not giving into the impulse to control. Yes. And that's really difficult. That takes a lot of work to not want to control other people, whether that's on social media or in real life.
That's so true. That's so true. You want to be in control of the narrative. You want to be in control of the story.
Yes.
And the church, for many centuries, has been in control of the narrative. And that is a fact, regardless what you think about the church. But if we look at the Pope, in some cards, he is holding a book. And what is book? A book is history. It's memory. It's recorded history. And this has been retold again and again. And you might think of ancient times when powerful kings all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, but throughout the centuries, suddenly they become deities. They become demigods. They become gods. And so legends become myths. Myths become beliefs. And eventually it's established religion. It's the word. You have to go by it. Or else, there's the Inquisition. So just think of that for a moment, because people believe so many stories today, not to talk about fake news, but the mainstream media. And they believe everything they read. And it's like, oh, I read that on the internet. And it's like,
it's funny talking to my teenagers. Did you know this happened? I was like, where the fuck did you read that?
It's all out there.
Yeah.
So that's one of the dangers I must warn of listening, because it's okay to listen, but you must have some discernment. And that's where the Pope comes in. This card is valuable for that reason. It's judgment. He is, as I mentioned before, between two pillars and two priests. And he has to discern, okay, where's the balance? There's an X in that composition. He's the quintessence figure of being centered and being able to, okay, I spot bullshit here. Okay, this is, okay. But maybe you don't have to say it out loud. You keep it to yourself, but you don't buy it. So, or you say, there's a kernel of truth here. I might take this. You have to be very careful when listening, because it's good to listen, but don't believe everything. And take it from me, because I've been through a lot of esoteric stuff, and I was like, wow, this makes so much sense.
Yeah, you've gotten into some really weird shit.
Yeah.
As have I.
Yeah, because when something sounds good, and there's this this bias, that confirmation bias.
Sure.
That anything that confirms your already preconceived belief, you're going to take it.
Right.
Because it's going to make me feel more secure. I know I have this. What about if I accept the possibility that I don't know anything?
Right.
That's just, I don't know shit. That this might be completely different from what so tarot might not be, it might be something that I might have to question.
Yeah.
Sooner or later.
Absolutely.
And religion as well. And anything that you might hold dear and sacred to your heart, consider for a moment that it might be not false, but not completely true.
Yeah. It sometimes makes my wife nervous, but I kind of embrace a type of radical skepticism, and I only hesitate with that concept because I think it has this negative connotation nowadays. It's funny going back to kind of teenagers, where you're kind of just like this arrogant asshole that thinks you know better, and so you're not going to believe things. But that's not what I mean by it. What I mean by radical skepticism, more in like the ancient kind of way that was understood, is I try to have a radical humility about my beliefs. I don't know if what I'm actually saying is 100% correct. I'm open to being wrong. I do have my convictions. I try to make certain kinds of decisions based on evidence and facts and a larger kind of framework. But I'm truly open, and it's taken a long time to get to this place. And I don't want it to seem like I'm superior to anyone, but I'm really open to being wrong about my views, my beliefs, my convictions.
That's very precious. And let me tell you, in this time of age,
it's not easy to be that way.
It's not easy. It's very hard, especially in this day of age of polarized politics, especially here in the United States, that you either stick with your tribe or you just don't belong. So you have to be, 100% with this guy or with the other.
Absolutely.
And why? Why can't I be just like have my own thoughts on, my own way of thinking, my own way of getting to one conclusion? It doesn't have to be one or the other.
I was sharing with another friend earlier this week in an episode that I retweeted a person. I can't even remember who it was, but they had written a book where they were trying to actually uphold the value of deep listening and putting different people on the political spectrum together to try to have honest conversations. And his summary of his experience and some of the research he did was, please, let's try to be bridge builders and not folks who throw grenades. And I hesitated to retweet that because I thought, fuck, there's going to be some probably liberal person on my feed who's going to say, you know, fuck you. Don't be a bridge builder. Be someone that, you know, is really angry and blows people up with grenades. And I was like, I retweeted it anyways. But yeah, like, let's be open.
That's beautiful. Bridge builder.
Which connects to the Pope, right?
It does connect with the Pope because the Pope, the word Pope, and this is the etymological origins of it. Pontifex, pontificium, priest of priests, means bridge builder. So he is an intermediary between not only, you know, the believers and non-believers, but also in time. Just think about it right now. The Pope is the only one who dresses the same way he has been dressing for centuries. Everyone has changed. Politicians, rulers are wearing their suits. They're very modern, but still the Pope is stuck to tradition. And but he is the bridge in many ways because he gets to meet with all these leaders, regardless of what you think about the Pope, right? But he is this bridge between time and space. And if we can, in one way or another, embody or aspire to become bridges, that is one way of listening. You know, being open, but at the same time, staying with perhaps the group of people that think likewise, like you think, but also trying to extend this bridge over to the other side and be able to cross it and say, okay, I get you and I see where you're coming from and you're my friend as well and you're welcome and I'm open.
Oh man, dude, preach. Listening is not synonymous with agreement.
Yes.
So okay, I'm gonna preach a little bit myself. So in the world of psychotherapy, you know, one of the big figures that really helped kind of pave the way for like modern psychotherapy was a guy named Carl Rogers. And he believed that one of the essential elements of any type of effective therapy was what he called unconditional positive regard, which is basically holding space for someone in front of you. It's not agreeing with their decisions or their beliefs or even their behaviors, but it's accepting them in their humanity and believing that they are capable of growth and change, but without needing to control what that's going to look like or where that's going to go. But it is a type of gentle listening and holding a person, metaphorically speaking, in their humanity without judgment, without needing to control them. And it's in that kind of posture toward the person that there's the hope of maybe them moving in a direction that's positive. I think we need more of that.
Absolutely.
I don't need to agree with you. You don't need to agree with me. But God damn it, do I need to hold you in a type of unconditional positive regard where I respect your humanity. Right?
Yes, absolutely. The Pope would agree. Well, at least this Pope on this card.
This symbol.
he is right there in the center. He doesn't go with either priest. You see the priest below, or in my card, Trump or Ronald McDonald.
Which I love, by the way.
he doesn't have to agree with one or the other. He is in the middle, and he is discerning and listening to both sides.
Yes.
There might be a priest that is more left-leaning. There's a priest that might be more right-leaning. Not in the case of my card, right? But in the case of the traditional tarot, you have that. So he is in the middle. He is able to build that bridge, that rainbow bridge that crosses both sides of the spectrum and is able to understand and be capable of fully grasping the ideas of one and the other.
Yes. Okay, so Patrick, what do you make of this statement? So when I was reading about this card, a person who we both admire, Alejandro Jodorowsky, he has this statement about the Pope where he says, "A bridge is not a country; it is merely a place of passage." What do you think he means by that? As you think about this card, what could that mean for us today? A bridge is not a country; it's merely a place of passage.
Because when you think of countries, you think of patriotism, you think of allegiance, you think of fidelity, that you're stuck with this country, and not stuck in the negative way, but you're really like you would defend this land to the ultimate consequences, even if you have to give it on your own life. So a passage, what I think Alejandro Jodorowsky means by this is more like a mindset of being able to go from one place to another, to migrate, to be a transitory being of perpetual openness that doesn't closes itself to the possibility of being contradicted or changed in any way, because it's always good to change as long as it's for your own good and in your own personal development, in order to grow as a human being and to mature, because you have to learn. And once you start thinking that you stop learning, that you know it all,
you're fucked.
You're fucked. That's over. It's over. It's game over.
So I'm sorry to interrupt you, but would you say that if listening is a type of bridge between people, we're encouraging people to listen deeply, radically, empathically, but that doesn't mean you identify with the position of the other person?
Yes.
That you don't necessarily need to inhabit their country or become a citizen, but there is some type of significance in being the bridge that understands, that relates. Fuck, yes. We're missing that, man.
We are. There's a
Hey, you want some bourbon?
Yeah,
just sure, a little bit. Okay.
That wine was good. Really.
It was so good. Dude, I'm gonna have to find the Lovers version next time.
Yeah,
I'll order that shit if I have to.
There's a movie I would recommend. I don't know if you've seen it on Netflix. All Quiet on the Western Front.
No, I haven't.
It's a German movie. It's a critique on war. It's based on a classic. I can't remember the author, but it's so powerful. It's about the First World War, and from the perspective of these kids that are so filled with patriotism and defending the motherland and defending Germany against the French, and it's just, there's this camaraderie, and they are young soldiers with this idealistic view of what the military role plays in their lives, right? They're just going to become heroes. But then the reality just sinks in, and it's just devastating and just so visceral and so heartbreaking that they come to realize the enemy is just like you. And they're suffering by this. They are husbands, they're fathers, they are sons, they're brothers. And when they come to check their wallets and their pictures, this guy's just like me, and I'm killing him. Why so much hatred? Why so much division? Why so much tribalism? And I love that movie. I must say that I highly recommend that movie.
Okay, I'm gonna have to watch that.
It's the best movie I've seen from last year, and it won some awards. But I feel like it should have won more. But because I feel like it's a very strong, compelling message to our times of political division, and especially what's happening right now with Ukraine and Russia.
Yeah,
it's very relevant. But it comes to for me, it strikes a chord, because I from a very young age, from when I was a little kid, I idealized. I want to become a soldier. And I'm not criticizing being, or romanticizing that way of life.
Sure.
But there are some downsides to it. And that movie is just beautiful. When you see it, it's like, okay, everyone is human. We all share this human experience of being part of a family. And now we are forced into hating each other. Why? And I feel like that reminds me of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Being a bridge, listening, being open, don't be so quick to judge and criticize anyone who just doesn't agree with you. And I feel that's what we have to learn from this card. Perhaps even at a very superficial level from the tarot perspective, because from the historical perspective, well, we have to admit many popes haven't been that flexible or tolerant towards other cultures and civilizations, especially if you go into the history of the Americas. It's just devastating, and it's just unredeemable. But from the card perspective, from the tarot, from what it means, the Hierophant, not the Pope, the Hierophant. It's this in between two worlds, to bring them together and understand and be at peace with them.
Oh, that's good. Okay, can I share the joke that I wanted to share? It's a little. I'll say this: it could be offensive. I first heard it on one of my favorite podcasts, Why Theory, from one of my favorite writers and thinkers, Todd McGowan, who I've had on the podcast a couple times. He loves jokes. So if anyone gets offended, you can blame him because I'm taking it from him. But it is kind of a joke that makes fun of religion and Catholicism in particular. For anyone listening, I have a deep respect for all of that, but it's important to poke fun. We have to.
Yeah, of course.
And so in light of sort of talking about the Pope, I feel like I need to share this one. Okay, so there's a Pope. No, not a Pope. Sorry. Let me go back. Let me take a sip of bourbon real quick. Okay, there's a priest. So it's not quite a Pope. It's a priest, a rabbi, and a nun. Okay?
They go into a bar?
Okay, so this is not going to be a bar joke. They actually, they're at a global conference with all the other leaders in the world's religions. And the stated purpose of the conference is to try to come together and figure out, how do we solve the world's, great suffering. It's an entire week, and everyone's talking and debating. They break out into small groups. Everyone's just exchanging ideas. And as you can imagine, they don't really come to any kind of satisfying conclusion. So at the very last day, it's probably Sunday night, the priest, the rabbi, and the nun they walk up to the main podium, and they're going to give the final remarks. And so the nun goes up to the microphone, and she says, okay, whatever we do, whatever solutions we come up with as leaders of these world religions, whatever we do, we cannot forget the children. And after she says that, the rabbi kind of runs up and grabs the microphone and says, the children, fuck the children. And the priest goes up and says, wait, we get to do that?
I can see how some people might be a little disturbed by that.
Yeah. I can see that too. Okay, so in terms of coming to a close, thank you for letting me share the joke.
Yeah, no, I laughed.
Good. I'm glad you did. Is there anything else about either your specific card or just the Pope, the Hierophant in general, that you would want to highlight that's important?
Yes. There's one final note I wanted to share. Of course, after the Reformation, we have become more and more individualistic, and of course, today with social media, it's even more. It's just gone too far. We are so self-centered, so narcissistic, that religion has become more of a horizontal relationship, of a supermarket of ideas that we get to choose, and shop around. It's not that same vertical relationship with God. The Pope has a different say in that matter, in this context, right? In this card, we have become far more eclectic, more open to different religions, which is good. Having more choices, more views, more perspectives, spiritually speaking, than our forefathers. But in a sense, we become more decentered. And our personal awareness of God has become more dispersed and a lot more lost. So there's this very good quote from Rachel Pollack, who has written 78 Degrees of Wisdom. She analyzes all the cards of the tarot, and I find her quite interesting to read, fascinating. And she says, a society builds its intellectual tradition over hundreds of years. Those who accept the tradition receive it from a standard by which to judge new ideas and information. Those who reject it must find their own ways and can easily get lost in superficial ideas. There are many people who, having given up on the dogma forced on them as children, fall into some new dogma, a cult, or some extremist political group, just as rigid and perhaps more shallow. Having rejected tradition, they have not really rejected the Hierophant. They have not accepted the responsibility of finding their own way.
Dude, that's so fucking good. I couldn't agree more. That's profound. I love that. I need to get that book.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. It goes into every one of the tarot cards, and I find it quite resourceful, especially to understanding, the archetypal meaning behind each one of these.
Sure.
But yeah, I recommend that book.
Okay, can I end, and again, just because this guy that we've been talking about, Byung-Chul Han, has been on my mind, in my imagination the last couple of weeks, I want to read this quote from his book, The Disappearance of Rituals, and just because I think it actually really connects with what we've been talking about. He has actually a really interesting way of framing what a ritual is, and I want to see what you think about it. So he says, rituals are symbolic acts. They represent and pass on the values and order on which a community is based. And here's what I want you to think about. They bring forth a community without communication. Today, however, communication without community prevails.
That's powerful.
What do you think he means by that? That rituals, and I think this actually really connects with what you were saying about listening. Rituals form a community without necessarily having to communicate, whereas now we communicate without any type of community.
Well,
there's so many different ways we could go with that, right? But I want to hear what you have to say.
Okay, every ritual is based on a story. Let's take that apart.
100%, a narrative.
Yeah. And there's a narrative. Let's take, for example, the one that I know, the Eucharist in the Catholic Church is based on the Last Supper.
Right.
So in order to take the Eucharist as a ritual in the Catholic Mass, you must understand the full meaning of that Last Supper, the story. You have to know the story. So it's, in the end, in a nutshell, it's all about knowing stories that are common to the community.
Yes.
Not to just yourself. This is about me. This is about me. This is about me.
That
narcissistic drive of the social media platforms that
where you're just like talking and posting and blah 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 blah.
Yeah, exactly. And you see so many celebrities. I'm not going to mention their names because I don't want to give them more fame than they already have. But I know, and you might you might agree on this, but they reinforce this idea that I don't care, I don't give an F. It's all about what I have to say, and you just consume it, and this is it, and blah, boom, take it. And hundreds of likes and thousands of likes. Oh yeah. It's so narcissistic, and it's communication. It's not community.
Right.
It's not about embracing the full spectrum of people around you. It's about me. And that's what our society has become more like. So I think that's what this author is getting at.
I couldn't agree more. I think that's exactly right.
Yeah. Just look at the celebrity tweets. Because I read those once in a while. If not, I would go insane. But once in a while, it pops out on my newsfeed. It's like, this is just a confirmation of all the things that we know are going wrong with our society, and it's just making it stronger and stronger because people keep believing in this shit. They keep following it, and they keep liking it, and they keep just reinforcing this whole idea of this narcissistic confirmation of validation that things revolve around yourself and not around the world, which it should be about community, the global community, because right now we have to talk about things in their proper context. It's a global community. It doesn't affect one community. It affects us all. Take COVID, for example. So
Yeah, for
anything,
sure.
climate change. So today we live in a day of age that it's really important and very relevant to know and understand this fully well, that anything that happens in the world right now, like a global pandemic or anything at a climate level, affects us all. For we are living all in the same island. We're all in the same boat. We all live in the same village. And so we must care for listening. We must create the bridge. We must reenact the archetype of the Pope, and we must open ourselves to others.
I think that's the place to end. That's beautiful. Man, Patrick.
Thanks.
Hey, cheers.
Cheers.
And to many more conversations.
Hopefully.
All right, man.
Yeah.
Until next time.
Till next time. Thanks.